We were cutting straight across to the United Nations General Assembly session where External Affairs Minister of India Sushma Swaraj was speaking. What was expected before the address was the stinging reply to Pakistan on terrorism, which has in fact happened over the last few minutes. Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister of India, in not one but many and several statements directly hitting out at Pakistan when it comes to harboring terrorism. Let me straight go across to our esteemed panelists joining us on the broadcast. Ambassador Arun Singh, what do you make of, first of all, the tone and tenor of the minister? Let's speak a little bit about that, because not once has she minced her words when it comes to actually lashing out at Pakistan on harboring terrorists and sponsoring terrorism.
So first of all, as you could see, it was a very, very powerful, eloquent speech delivered impactfully. She did touch upon various issues of concern to India and listed them out. But there was a sharp and extended focus on Pakistan, not just in the speech at the UN General Assembly, but in some of her other meetings and multilateral events that she attended there. I think as far as the speech at the General Assembly was concerned, it was motivated also by the statement of the Pakistan Prime Minister, where he made many unfounded allegations against India and spent an extended length of time laboring on, as they described it, the Kashmir issue. So perhaps the sense was that it was important at this very forum for the minister to respond to that. And in her response, she drew attention to the initiatives that the Indian Prime Minister had taken for advancing the process of peace and dialogue with Pakistan.
And offer that Pakistan has, as she mentioned, denied to accept.
That's right, and rebuffed it on various occasions, including the various terrorist incidents that were generated. She referred to the agreement that was there to have the comprehensive bilateral dialogue, and again, that could not advance. And then described at length Pakistan's involvement with terrorism and the various terrorist groups it has spawned, which has impacted not just India, but other countries. Afghanistan, terrorist base in Pakistan have carried out attacks in Europe, in the United States. So she drew attention to that, and also the fact that although Pakistan has been using terrorism as an instrument of state policy now for decades, and has also been trying to use that instrument against India, the fact is, if you compare the two countries today, the social and economic situation in Pakistan has deteriorated significantly, but India has made tremendous progress. And she referred in that context also to the progress we had made in science and technology, in information technology. So I think, again, the sense that the world today sees Pakistan as a problem state because of its involvement with terrorism, and the occasion was used to reinforce that message.
Taking a cue from the point you just mentioned, the difference between India and Pakistan that she has talked about in not one but several statements, I do want to quote the minister again, and we will of course take a quick listen in again to some of those excerpts made by the minister there during that address. But IIT versus LET, IIM versus JEM, AIMS versus HM, that's the comparison, very succinctly put by the minister there in one line, drawing a sharp contrast between India and Pakistan in terms of the progress that India has made versus the priority that Pakistan has.
That's right. So I think an attempt to show how India has been involved in institution building, how India has been involved in the effort at education, involved in the effort at development, whereas Pakistan's involvement with terrorism for short-term gains has really also sapped Pakistani economy and society. And that's something, as she said, Pakistan's leaders need to realize and absorb and take further steps based on that. So I think that was very effectively conveyed.
And also the aspect of how your definition of terrorism cannot be different from mine. She's talked about how there is no difference between good terrorism and bad terrorism. That, of course, goes back a long way. That's an issue and a statement that's been coming up every time the Indian leadership talks about there's no differentiation, and that's something that's been echoed by the United States as well.
So, it's a complex issue in the sense that India has been facing the problem of terrorism in a very sharp way since 1980.
Yes.
We faced it initially in Punjab and then in Jammu and Kashmir, and in both instances sponsored by Pakistan. But as the minister herself said, for a long time, many countries, especially in the West, did not pay attention to this issue, to this challenge, and wanted to describe it just as a law and order problem. Their approach changed after the 9/11 event in New York, and then they started to look at terrorism with a different prism.
Yes.
But even though they started addressing terrorism with a different prism, the focus remained on attacking terrorist groups that were targeting the West, targeting Europe, targeting the United States. But terrorist groups that were targeting other countries, they did not bring them in their sights in the beginning.
Yes.
And also because they needed cooperation from Pakistan on various other things. For example, in the case of US, they needed cooperation from Pakistan for supplying their troops in Afghanistan. So they did not have a complete, full and wide-ranging, without any exception approach to dealing with the challenge of terrorism. But over time, there is a realization that you cannot segment the different terrorist groups. They support each other, they mutate, their agendas change. For example, it is well known that the Al-Qaeda has received support from Lashkar-e-Toiba and other groups based in Pakistan. Therefore, to make those divisions and distinctions is not effective long-term strategy.
Right.
And so that's why she was making the point that it is important not to get into this issue of definition of terrorism and not to work for consensus on that, and to try and look at good terrorists, bad terrorists, because that will lead to failed policy. But the very fact that the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, which India has been piloting for almost 2 decades, has not been realized, is because this kind of approach still continues to some extent in the international community.
Just hold that thought there. I do also want to touch upon other aspects with you, but let's get in a word from senior defense analyst joining us from Islamabad as well, Maid Ali, joining us in the broadcast. Appreciate your speaking with us here on WION. Mr. Ali, first up, there are pointed questions that the External Affairs Minister of India has directed at the Pakistani Prime Minister. As an analyst sitting in Islamabad, how do you see Pakistan responding to those?
Well, first of all, I'm not sitting in Islamabad, I'm in Lahore.
I was told otherwise. All right, I apologize.
No, you don't have to.
Yes.
Secondly, I think it's the same rhetoric that India has sort of trumpeted for the last so many years.
Sure.
And I think there's certain concerns are, I agree to certain concerns, but not to the whole picture that Ms. Swaraj has painted of Pakistan. And I think there are certain things which need to be taken care of before we and understood before we talk about terrorism.
Sure.
And Pakistan sponsoring terrorism, state terrorism, whatever you call it. You see, Pakistan being, I know that India desperately wants Pakistan to be declared as a terrorist state, failed state, but I think it's not that easy, because as the previous speaker said, the ambassador, that time to time the priorities of the West, they keep on changing, and for those priorities they find friends, and then they make foes, and then again they find friends. You see, look at them, and they were there here in Pakistan before Soviet Union collapsed. And then after that, they left us high and dry and left us at the mercy of the people. These barbaric people from Afghanistan. We already didn't have any Durand line, so we had a problem. Then we had to suffer a lot ourselves. We made a lot of mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But you see, they're saying that Pakistan has been creating problems for India in Punjab or in Jammu and Kashmir. Of course, as far as Punjab is concerned, I could concede that yes, that point, yes, Pakistan did try to take advantage. So did India, and the Prime Minister Modi, Honorable Prime Minister Modi, himself admitted that he fought there in Dhaka for Bangladesh. So every neighboring country which doesn't have good relations with the neighbor, they go against each other. So and drawing parallel between Balochistan and Kashmir, I think it's a little bit taking things too far. Balochistan is part of Pakistan. Balochistan is predominantly Muslim. and Kashmir is a disputed territory, whether you admit it or not. It is a disputed territory, and it is predominantly Muslim.
I do want to ask you a follow-up question, Maid Ali, but before I do that, let's go straight across to my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, who's also joining us in the broadcast. Right after that, I do also want to go to Taha, who's joining us from Islamabad. Ramesh, first up, we're just a few minutes away from that address that's been made by the External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj. I do want to ask you to break it down for our viewers, the key takeaways from that address before we take this further.
Indeed, Molly, we saw Minister Swaraj speak there for a little less than 22 minutes in Hindi, as always. And there were two occasions when she received an applause from the delegates present in the General Assembly Hall. Well, the first occasion was when she referred to how Pakistan would have become so much different and it judiciously used the money it was given for development purposes and not use it or reroute it for fomenting terrorism. Second occasion was towards the end of her intervention when she invoked a Sanskrit shloka to derive or to drive home India's point. Now, coming to the substantive part of her intervention, Molly, to my mind, she has said it in no uncertain terms. India is the oldest victim of terrorism.
Yes.
And she went on to say that there is a need for introspection on the part of the world community, and it is time the world moved beyond words, and especially on the issue of the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, or CCIT, which India, by the way, piloted way back in 1996. It's been 21 years and counting, and we are still, as I said before her speech in an earlier discussion on WION, Molly, that we are still debating the semantics of the word terrorism. Who is a terrorist, who is not, what constitutes terrorism, what does not. And as she said, it is time the world walks the talk and treat terrorism as a threat to humanity. And she also went on to especially cast a spotlight on China's duplicity, that she referred to the fact that even within the UN Security Council, for that matter, there is no consensus or unanimity on the issue of proscribing terrorists or terror groups. And she was referring there to Masood Azhar's pending proscription, which India has been asking the UNSC to do for a long, long time now. But China is the only or the sole country standing in the way of a UN proscription on Masood Azhar, the leader of Jaish-e-Mohammed. And then she went on to train her guns on Pakistan in particular, where she said that whereas India is fighting poverty, Pakistan is fighting India. And that, in my mind, sums up the tone, the sentiment prevalent in South Asia today as we speak. Also, she went on to cite and accuse Pakistan of reneging on the comprehensive bilateral dialogue which was spoken about first in December 2015 when Minister Swaraj traveled to Islamabad for the Heart of Asia conference. And since then, we have not seen any progress on the comprehensive bilateral dialogue. And very quickly, Molly, she went on to contrast India of 2017 and Pakistan of 2017, whereas India is growing strongly and surely, and Pakistan, on the other hand, is only good at exporting terrorists, at creating terrorists, whereas India produced scholars, scientists, engineers, doctors. And she said that this was probably the first time in many, many years that we saw three countries join issue with Pakistan by exercising their right to reply, namely India, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, all coming together on the same platform to criticize, castigate, call out Pakistan, isolate it for its duplicity on the issue of terrorism.
Right, just hold that thought there, Ramesh. Let's also go across to my colleague Taha Siddiqui joining us from Islamabad. Taha, it might be too early, but it's been a good 15-odd minutes since the minister there concluded that speech. Any initial word that's come in terms of the Pakistani media and the way it's been reporting on those remarks made by the minister?
Well, while the remarks were ongoing at the UNGA, I was following the local media here. But as of yet, there hasn't been any coverage at all. These statements haven't been sort of followed through most of the mainstream media channels. Yesterday, they did cover the speech of the Pakistani Prime Minister, but this hasn't been talked about at all. So we're not, as of yet, so that's why there has been no official reaction also. The Pakistani Prime Minister himself, from what we know, the Foreign Office has just released the information that he's also left the UNGA, so he was not in the audience either. It will probably take time when he receives a message or the Foreign Minister receives the message. The delegation has left New York, from what we know from the Pakistani Foreign Office.
Ambassador, I do want to come back to you and touch upon how perhaps we've not been surprised by the stinging remarks made by the minister there, but they do also give us a reason to discuss what Pakistan's response in the coming days or weeks might be. Because let's face it, we are talking about a country which allows a terrorist to float his own political party on ground. Where exactly do you think this rhetoric and criticism that's being aimed at Pakistan really factors in when it comes to the ground reality within the country?
So we'll have to watch, because at one level, clearly, Pakistan's isolation in the international community has been increasing gradually over time. Because for a long time, many countries essentially gave them a bailout because they needed Pakistan for their own reasons. But if you saw the statement that the US President made on August 21, it was a very sharp attack on Pakistan and its involvement with terrorism at the level of a US President. At lower levels, one had heard things like that, but not at the level of the US President. Similarly, the fact that Pakistan-based terrorist groups were listed in a BRICS document coming out from a meeting in China would again have been noticed in Pakistan. So I think there would be a realization within Pakistan that this strategy also has negative consequences.
Right.
You would recall that some time back there had been a report in a Pakistani newspaper, Dawn, referring to differences within the civilian establishment in Pakistan and the military on how to approach terrorist groups. And once the report was leaked, many officials in the then Prime Minister's office were forced by the army to be sacked. So clearly there is also a deep division within Pakistan on the consequences of the approach they have adopted and how to deal with that moving ahead. But I think the Pakistan Army, its inter-services intelligence, has for a long time spawned terrorist groups as an instrument of its policy against India, against Afghanistan. And as one of the commentators pointed out, in the early 1980s, it was the US, the West and many others that supported the building of jihadi groups to target the Soviet Union when it had a presence in Afghanistan. And then many of Pakistan's capacities were built since then.
Yes.
But now that the world is asking Pakistan to abandon that policy, they are probably finding it difficult to completely move away from that and give up what they may feel is an instrument of leverage. But this instrument of leverage is also having negative consequences. And as was just referred, other countries, not just India, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, are having issues, including countries in the West. So I think we have to see how it evolves.
And let me also take that across to Maid Ali joining us from Lahore. I did get that location right this time around. Mr. Ali, what do you make of the fact that it's not just India which is lashing out at Pakistan when it comes to sponsoring terrorism? You've got criticism coming in from the United States, you've got criticism coming in from the European lawmakers just recently. So what do you feel is the message that's going across the world when it comes to Pakistan and its association with terrorism?
Well, as for the issue of terrorism, there are no two opinions. Pakistan doesn't afford indulging in any sort of I would say, nurturing terrorism, good terrorism, bad terrorism, blah, blah, blah. I think Pakistan doesn't afford any kind of outfits, any kind of terrorism in any form at this point in time when we are heading for huge economic projects, especially with China and also Russia involved. As for the statement of the US President, I think it was not what it appeared, because as far as my information is concerned, I think they're again going for an attempt to use these forces in Afghanistan use Haqqani Network, use other outfits, which I believe all these outfits, since they belong to the same school of thought, I don't differentiate among them. I think ISIL or ISIS or Jindullah or Lashkar or whatever you call that, they are the same people and they are interoperable. So I think Americans are again trying to exploit this talent, I would say, in Pakistan, and that is very unfortunate if it happens. You see, on the face of it, Trump has dropped a clear, I would say, this statement, clear warning to Pakistan that Pakistan needs to set its house in order. But I think underneath something else is going on. That's why China came up with the straight formal statement in BRICS. Before that, China had raised this issue informally, but in BRICS it came out very clearly because it knew that the US has a renewed interest in Pakistan, and the interest involved these outfits, and China doesn't want these outfits to flourish in Pakistan to safeguard its investment, and rightly so. And I totally agree that Pakistan should not now indulge or support these groups, and there's a difference of opinion, and there are cracks within the government and the establishment. And let me tell you very clearly that majority of Pakistan is liberal. It's a small minority, and you've seen that in the recent elections. They had floated a party with the name of Milli Muslim League, and they couldn't get more than 3,000 votes. So they don't have any support among the people. Majority of this country is liberal. A small minority, although very effective and patronized, it is there. And we need to take care of them. We just cannot flirt with them any longer.
Okay, stay with me, please. Requesting all of you just stay on with us. Let's also now take a quick listen in to what the External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj, had said when it comes to terrorism being sponsored by Pakistan just a short while back at the UNGA. Take a listen in.
हमने IITs बनाए, Indian Institute of Technology. हमने IIMs बनाए, Indian Institute of Management. हमने एम्स जैसे अस्पताल बनाए, ऑल इंडिया इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मेडिकल साइंसेज. हमने अंतरिक्ष के क्षेत्र में विश्व प्रसिद्ध संस्थान बनाए. पर पाकिस्तान वालों, आपने क्या बनाया? आपने लश्कर तैयबा बनाया, आपने जैशे मोहम्मद बनाया, आपने हक्कानी नेटवर्क बनाया, आपने हिजबुल मुजाहिदीन बनाया, आपने आतंकवादी ठिकाने बनाए, आपने टेररिस्ट कैंप्स बनाए. सभापति जी, मेरे देश की संस्कृति पूरी वसुधा के लोगों के सुखों की कामना करने वाली संस्कृति है. हम वसुधैव कुटुंबकम कहते हैं, जिसका अर्थ है पूरा विश्व एक परिवार है. और इसीलिए हम केवल अपने सुख की कामना नहीं करते, हम सर्व के सुख की कामना करते हैं, सबके सुख की कामना करते हैं. और जिस मंत्र के माध्यम से सबके सुख की कामना करते हैं, उसी मंत्र का उच्चारण करके मैं अपनी बात को समाप्त करना चाहूंगी. वो मंत्र है सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. जिसका अर्थ है सभी सुखी हों, सभी स्वस्थ हों, सभी अपने इर्द गिर्द अच्छा ही अच्छा देखें, कोई भी दुखी ना हो, कोई भी दुखी ना हो, कोई भी दुखी ना हो. धन्यवाद.
I do want to go back to my colleague and our correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran, who's been taking us through the key takeaways from that address. Ramesh, somewhere do you also see one of those statements that was made by the minister regarding differentiating terrorism and questioning how one can fight against terrorism together if there are, differences drawn between various terrorists? also as a veiled attack at China because it's been putting a ban on Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar, where she talks about if we cannot agree to define our enemy, how can we fight together? If we continue to differentiate between good terrorists and bad terrorists, how can we fight together? If even the United Nations Security Council cannot agree on the listing of terrorists, how can we fight together? A veiled attack towards China?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about what she was referring to when she spoke about terrorism, especially in light of the 21-year-old pending issue of a consensus or the adoption of the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, or CCIT, which India mooted way back in 1996. It is in that context Ms. Swaraj spoke about, without referring to China by name, of course, when she spoke about how there were differences even within the UN Security Council on the issue of terrorism, and we should not differentiate between one terrorist or one from the other, and so on and so forth. So clearly, she was also equally pointing her guns on China, as was the case with Pakistan, and specifically about Pakistan, Molly. I was going through my notes here, and she also referred to how Pakistan should introspect and ask itself as to why the peace talks are stalled at the moment. In December 2015, when Ms. Swaraj traveled to Islamabad for the Heart of Asia conference, both sides, India and Pakistan, agreed to resumption of what is known as a comprehensive bilateral dialogue. But that remains in a limbo. It's comatose. It is stillborn, so to speak, and the talks are going nowhere. And she said that
unfortunately,
peace overtures, because he said Prime Minister Modi for himself had traveled to Lahore and met with the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, all in a bid to restart dialogue and come to some sort of an agreement on the way forward for the prosperity of South Asia as a whole.
Right. Stay with me, please, Ramesh. Taha, you know, we're talking about not one but several statements that have been made by the minister targeting Pakistan. I do want to point out to one where she has directly questioned Pakistani Prime Minister Mr. Abbasi, talking about how there has been constantly an effort made, an offer made by the Indian Prime Minister to his counterpart in Pakistan, extending an offer of peace and friendship, but that's been outrightly rejected by Pakistan time and again. This, of course, is not surprising given the fact that India has been talking in the same, tone and tenor, talking about how India has focused on peace and tranquility while Pakistan has chosen otherwise.
Well, as far as the narrative in Islamabad is concerned, basically when you talk to people here, when you talk to people at the Foreign Office or the policymakers, the thing is that Pakistan basically is also saying from its own soil. I mean, right now, for example, this whole Sushma Swaraj's statement or reporting on it will not really exist, but the Pakistani Foreign Office, what they're saying, will exist, and that's the sort of the thing that makes the narrative. And the narrative in Pakistan is that Pakistan is offering to talk to India bilaterally even, but it will be about Kashmir. Then the narrative goes on to say what we see in the local media here, or the policymakers will tell you, is that India is the one that is not responding on those terms and rather focusing on terrorism. And then Pakistan does not agree on the whole idea that, Pakistan. But then again, I mean, in the last few months, we've seen, for example, the foreign minister, when he was leaving, before he was leaving for his international tours, he went to China, went to Turkey, Iran. Before that, he did talk about how globally, Pakistan is getting embarrassed. It was one of the first times a foreign minister was being so frank. Then he also went on to say that, there are these problems like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, which have existence in Pakistan, and they are operating, and they're embarrassing us. He also said that we should not try the patience of our friends, which a lot of people feel was a reference to China and the BRICS statement that came before. So there definitely there's that realization. You see that, even when Nawaz Sharif came into power in 2013, he went to India to sort of take part in the oath ceremony of Modi, and that was a gesture that the Pakistani Prime Minister was trying to sort of give to India. But the problem comes with whether the narrative is different on the media. The politicians are saying something else, or the civilian government is saying something else, but the policy deciders are the ones who do not want to go ahead and sort of, solve this problem. And those are the ones which are probably at times backing these groups. Right now, for example, if you know, in NA 120, the election that Nawaz Sharif had, on the 3rd and the 4th were religious groups. And there are reports that, the religious groups, these militant groups, are now being mainstreamed in Pakistan, and the military might be behind those plans. So the military is the one that decides security policy, and they are not in the mood to talk, from what I understand, or what my interactions have been, or sort of things I've seen.
All right, stay with me, please, Taha. Let's now take a quick listen in to that statement that was made by the External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj, where she has directly questioned and lashed out at Pakistani Prime Minister Mr. Abbasi, of course, in a quick rebuttal that was made to that address. Let's take a listen in.
वो यहाँ खड़े होकर संयुक्त राष्ट्र के पुराने प्रस्तावों की बात भी कर रहे थे, पर क्या उन्हें याद नहीं कि शिमला समझौते और लाहौर डिक्लेरेशन के अंतर्गत हम दोनों देशों ने ये निर्णय किया है कि हम आपसी मसलों को इकट्ठे बैठ कर के हल करेंगे, किसी तीसरे की मध्यस्थता स्वीकार नहीं करेंगे। सभापति जी, सच्चाई तो यह कि पाकिस्तान के सियासतदानों को याद तो सब कुछ है, लेकिन अपनी सुविधा के कारण वो उसे भूल जाने का नाटक करते हैं। पाकिस्तान के वजीर आजम ने कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव डायलॉग की बात भी की। मैं उन्हें याद दिला दूं कि 9 दिसंबर 2015 को हार्ट ऑफ एशिया के सम्मेलन के लिए जब मैं इस्लामाबाद गई थी, तो उनके नेता और उस समय के वजीर आजम नवाज शरीफ की सरपरस्ती में नए सिरे से डायलॉग शुरू करने का फैसला हुआ था, और उसे नया नाम भी दिया गया था। नाम था कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव बायलैटरल डायलॉग। बायलैटरल शब्द सोच समझकर डाला गया था, ताकि कोई संदेह, कोई शक शुबा, कोई डाउट रह ही ना जाए, और यह निश्चित हो जाए कि बातचीत केवल दोनों देशों के बीच में होनी है, किसी तीसरे की मदद लेकर नहीं। लेकिन वो सिलसिला आगे क्यों नहीं बढ़ा, इसके लिए भी अब्बासी साहब जवाबदेह आप हैं, मैं नहीं।
Ambassador, I do want to get you in on the aspect of how, to what extent do you feel the atmosphere for Pakistan really has changed over the years, specifically on the global stage. Over the last few months, we've seen a criticism coming in from not just one but several quarters aimed at Pakistan. The atmosphere for Pakistan, I'll just come back to you, Ambassador. I'm being told that there are live reactions coming in. In fact, there is a tweet that's been put out by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi just close on the heels of that address made by the External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj. Sushma Swaraj was insightful in identifying global challenges and strongly reiterated India's commitment to create a better planet, is the word coming in from the Indian Prime Minister. A strong message was given by Sushma Swaraj on the dangers of terrorism and why we have to unite and fight this menace. That's a reaction coming in from the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Ambassador, coming back to the aspect we were just discussing, how the atmosphere for Pakistan really has changed over the years, over specifically the last few months very recently on the global stage.
So I think clearly the atmosphere of Pakistan has been getting more complicated. And as we discussed earlier, the US is beginning to take a harsher position on the support that terrorist groups are getting in Pakistan. And US is doing that because US is not able to achieve in objectives in Afghanistan because of the support that Pakistan has been giving to terrorist groups that are attacking US forces, US persons. So because of that, a certain reaction is being created in the US. As far as China was concerned, for a long time, China ignored Pakistan's involvement with terrorist groups so long as the Pakistan Army and its agencies gave China some cooperation on the terrorist groups that were targeting China, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement and others. I think China is beginning to realize that Pakistan's involvement with terrorism is creating complications for Pakistan, for China's larger strategy in South Asia, China's strategy in Afghanistan, and therefore they would also like Pakistan to take a relook at this issue. At the same time, as you mentioned, they are preventing the listing of Masood Azhar at the UN, and they're doing it because clearly Pakistan has asked them to prevent that listing, and they want to do this gesture for their strategic partner, or they want to do this gesture because they may feel that listing of Masood Azhar could create domestic political problems within Pakistan, and so they're trying to help Pakistan. But then they have to also realize that if you try to segment terrorist groups, then the groups that were attacking China cannot be effectively tackled. So I think that realizing is happening. Earlier, for example, there were reports that even in the United Kingdom, so long as they were getting some support on the terrorist groups that were attacking in the UK, or terrorist elements that were creating incidents or planning in the UK, they would ignore some of the other aspects. That is also beginning to change. Right. So I think gradually there is a global recognition that there is a need to address Pakistan's involvement with terrorism. And so Pakistan, I think, realizes that. But the problem is that their army and the ISI has deep interlinkages with these terrorist groups, and they still see them as being important instruments for them to achieve what they want in Afghanistan and to create challenges for us.
Why don't we now take a listen in to another excerpt from that address that was made by the Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj just a short while back, while she was addressing the United Nations General Assembly, specifically lashing out at Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism. Let's take a listen in.
सभापति जी, हम तो गरीबी से लड़ रहे हैं, लेकिन हमारा पड़ोसी देश पाकिस्तान हमसे लड़ रहा है। परसों इसी मंच से बोलते हुए पाकिस्तान के वजीर आजम शाहिद खाकान अब्बासी ने भारत पर तरह तरह के इल्जाम लगाए, हमें स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिज्म फैलाने का गुनहगार भी बताया और मानवाधिकार उल्लंघन का आरोपी भी। जिस समय वो बोल रहे थे तो सुनने वाले कह रहे थे, लुक हु इज टॉकिंग। जो मुल्क हैवानियत की हदें पार करके सैकड़ों बेगुनाहों को मौत के घाट उतरवाता है, वो यहाँ खड़ा होकर हमें इंसानियत का सबक सिखा रहा था, हमें मानवाधिकार का पाठ पढ़ा रहा था। पाकिस्तान के वजीर आजम ने कहा कि मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना ने पाकिस्तान को शांति और दोस्ती की विदेश नीति विरासत में दी थी। मैं उन्हें याद दिलाना चाहूंगी कि मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना ने शांति और दोस्ती की नीति विरासत में दी या नहीं थी, ये तो इतिहास बहुत अच्छी तरह जानता है, लेकिन ये एक सच्चाई है कि प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने शांति और दोस्ती की नीयत जरूर दिखाई थी। उन्होंने सारे रुकावटों को पार करते हुए दोस्ती का हाथ आगे बढ़ाया, किंतु कहानी बदरंग किसने की, अब्बासी साहब, इसका जवाब आपको देना है, मुझे नहीं।
Let me go back to our correspondent Taha Siddiqui joining us from Islamabad. Taha, it's been a short while after that speech was made. Any reactions that have come in so far? What exactly has the local media in Pakistan been saying while reporting on that address?
Well, basically, as we speak right now, I've been following the local news. Some parts of the speech have made it to the local media, mainstream media, particularly with regards to the comments that you just ran of Sushma Swaraj, in which she talks about, how she's fighting poverty and Pakistan is fighting India. Then about the dialogue, basically, there's a lot of focus on that also, and the aspect of the dialogue and how she came to Pakistan to have this composite dialogue, and then the Prime Minister did not respond to it. Basically, so those things are being highlighted right now as we speak.
All right, Ramesh, does that surprise you, as we just discussed with the ambassador, the kind of reaction that Pakistan is perhaps expected to display over the next few hours or days in response to the address made by the Indian External Affairs Minister? Deniability has remained a constant with Pakistan, if I may put it outright.
Indeed, very true, Molly. But the fact remains that Pakistan is the problem and Pakistan is the solution as well. The problem is that Pakistan is living in denial, as you said, and that it runs with the hare and hunts with the hound. That policy has to end. The policy of using terror as an instrument of state policy has to end. And Pakistan needs to introspect, because solutions have to come from within Pakistan. It cannot be enforced on Pakistan, because ultimately, for a lasting solution, Pakistan needs to change, at least revisit its orientation towards India in particular, and not see India as an existential threat in terms. So clearly the onus is clearly on Pakistan, and it remains to be seen how it chooses to respond to India's peace overtures, as was mentioned by Ms. Swaraj when Prime Minister Modi visited Lahore in December 2015. Daring to go there and meet with the then Prime Minister in spite of objections back home, without having to worry about how the domestic constituency will react to his shaking hands and giving Nawaz Sharif a bear hug. So clearly, India can now turn around and tell the world community, look, we've exhausted more or less all our options. We tried we made every effort to open a dialogue with Pakistan in terms of, in the hope of encouraging peace in South Asia. But on every occasion, it was rebuffed by the Pakistani deep state. And therefore, the question is, will Pakistan introspect and come to terms with its own drawbacks, handicaps, and turn over a new leaf, as it were, in the days and weeks ahead? But that's a tall order, actually, to expect of Pakistan. But then one has to live on the basis of hope, at least in the immediate future.
Aptly summarized. I would have loved to also give more time to Mr. Ali to respond, as well as to Ambassador Arun Singh here, but we're completely out of time. I'm being asked to end this discussion right this minute, thanking all our correspondents and our guests for joining us on this discussion. We'll, of course, continue to break down the key takeaways from that address that's been made by the Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj while speaking at the UNGA.